I left my wife with nothing after she called me a jerk and got pregnant by him. I'm 33, and my wife is 27. We got married 6 months ago after dating for a year. We met online and started dating after a few dates. We got engaged pretty quickly and married. I consider myself I'm a bit of a nerd, so when an attractive girl who told me she loved me expressed interest, I was completely enamored. I would have done anything for her, and she knew it. I have a demanding job since I own a small business, which requires frequent travel during the week. I'm rarely at home before taxes. I was making $150,000 a year. She wasn't employed, essentially depending on me for her livelihood. She was somewhat lazy, but I didn't think much of it because I allowed it to happen. She never engaged in household chores or cooking or cleaning, so the lack of it didn't strike me as unusual. A few months into our marriage, my wife dropped the bombshell that she was pregnant. Unfortunately, I was out of town at the time. I had to drop everything and rush back home the following day. I took her to a clinic that confirmed she was 2 months pregnant. A week later, I came home from the office to retrieve something for a job I was about to undertake. I noticed my wife's car in the garage, indicating she was at home. As I opened the door, I heard noises emanating from the bedroom. I followed the escalating sounds before reaching the bedroom. I had a feeling something was up, and it only got worse from there. The door was wide open, so I walked in to find her having sex with another man. She immediately said it wasn't what it seemed. Keep in mind, she was 2 months pregnant at the time. I couldn't even put into words how I felt watching her with another man in our bedroom. I had been mentally preparing to become a father and had built my world around her. I was preparing to become a father and had built my world around her. I had made every effort to ensure her comfort. Yet there she was, being unfaithful in our bedroom. That moment revealed her true nature. They both stared at me in shock as I turned away and left the room. She tried to convince me that I hadn't seen what I clearly witnessed. She was trying to make me look like a gullible fool. I regained my composure and quickly retrieved what I needed before leaving. Before leaving, I made it clear that she should be gone by the time I returned. On the drive back to work, I was a wreck. My thoughts were all over the place, and I was lucky not to have had an accident. I couldn't help but think about all the times she professed her love for me. Now I realize it was all a facade. I had no inkling of her deceit, partly because my job kept me away during the week. She had played her part so well. She was so convincing that I never suspected a thing. She wanted me to support her throughout her pregnancy and then raise another man's child. My wife kept calling and leaving voicemails, but I chose not to answer. When I got to the office, I called a friend who waited for about 2 hours before going to my place. My friend told me that she had left, taking essential belongings with her. After that, I went to Home Depot. I went to the depot and changed all the locks on the house. I later found out that she was staying with her family, so I contacted my lawyer and served her with divorce papers. My lawyer told me it was important to stay silent. He advised me not to take calls from her family or friends, and if I did speak to mutual friends, to be polite but to avoid discussing the divorce. He said he would handle any related conversations on my behalf. My lawyer was right about talking on my behalf. I didn't want to cause any trouble, but it was good advice to avoid any potential issues or arguments. We texted each other to arrange for her to collect the rest of her things over the weekend. My friend represented me while she was there. In response, she hired a divorce lawyer and asked for $2,000. She wanted $2,000 a month in alimony for 5 years. She said the pregnancy was mine and that she needed financial support. She also wanted to stay on my health insurance, which I thought was unreasonable. Despite her alimony demands, I decided not to get angry. It was good that my attorney looked over the agreement first. He told me that although she may have expected certain things, they weren't going to happen. I didn't mind sharing assets, but I was unhappy about some things that happened during our marriage. My main goal was to get her out of my life. I wasn't going to reward her with monthly payments for 5 years for her misbehavior. I wasn't going to continue covering her health insurance or raise a child that clearly wasn't mine. She could seek support from the guys she had been involved with. When I discussed with my attorney how to navigate around the alimony and other obligations I wasn't eager to fulfill, We considered her lack of employment. I was earning $150. She was getting $0.000 a year before taxes, and she depended entirely on me for her financial well-being. Our ultimate goal was to get the alimony completely eliminated, and we managed to do that. His concern was that if we couldn't get it eliminated, we should aim to significantly reduce it due to her actions. Even though it wasn't explicitly written, we could support our case with statistical evidence. He pointed out that in many cases the courts tend to favor women, and there was a risk that her attorney might try to portray me as an enabler and shift blame onto me for her infidelity. He didn't take into account that I had been working this job for over 3 years. We'd been together for almost a year before she started cheating. The only difference was that I worked an hour or so less during that period, but it still amounted to a significant workload, typically 60 to 80 hours a week. It's even more now, 6+ years later. If I hadn't caught her, she might have become even more dependent on me today. That's why my attorney advised a strong approach, which in hindsight might have been overkill. However, I trusted his expertise, given his experience in such matters. He wasn't infallible himself, so he understood the situation well. My attorney was looking for evidence of my wife's infidelity to strengthen my case in the divorce proceedings. He suggested that I hire a private investigator to gather more evidence that could be used in court. My attorney arranged for the investigator to work on my behalf, although I paid the investigator directly to say that he did an excellent job. He really did perform exceptionally well. I hope I never have to face him on the opposing side in such a situation. I should note that he also checked up on me, not as extensively as he did on her, but just to ensure. I probably should have been contributing to the issues, otherwise I might have been supporting her financially for a few years, typically around 5. It could even have continued until she remarried, although that's quite rare these days. Having a job like mine doesn't help. Not long after hiring the private investigator, he captured evidence of her spending time with the same guy I had caught her with. I made a mistake by not canceling my credit card, which she had access to. Consequently, she went out with her lover that evening and racked up a bill of about $5. These weren't high-limit cards. I got them to improve my credit score. I'd been on a cash-only basis for a while, so I'd forgotten about them. A month later, the private investigator found out that she'd been cheating throughout our marriage and even before that. He also found out about 2 guys she'd been involved with but had ended things with. Both of them agreed to provide affidavits to my attorney. The private investigator also collected a lot of photographic evidence based on the testimonies of the affair partners. They realized that my demanding 60 to 80-hour work weeks played right into her plans. She avoided infidelity on the weekends, and her boyfriend was well aware of it. Her actions were carefully calculated. When the private investigator spoke with the 2 individuals who had gotten fed up enough to provide statements, they were quite candid. They emphasized that you didn't reach out to her unless she initiated contact and so on. The private investigator was the key to my salvation. He managed to track down people she had previously dated. 2 of them were angry enough to sign an affidavit stating that she had cheated on me and knowingly taken steps to keep me in the dark. I believe alimony can be justifiable in certain situations, such as when one spouse significantly out-earns the other or when one spouse has been out of the workforce for an extended period due to the marriage. It can be tough to get back into the job market after a long break. It's reasonable to expect financial support for the duration of the marriage. However, in my case, she was the one who cheated. I wasn't going to reward her for her deceitful behavior that led to our separation. The private investigator took pictures of her with various men. These were mostly used as evidence of her behavior, but they were also part of the process. By speaking with some of these men, the investigator traced back to 2 individuals who felt scorned by her because she had ended their relationships. They played a big part in the judge's decision. They not only said they'd been with her while we were married, but also that she'd been deceitful. They said she'd not called at weekends when I was home, never come to the house, and told me not to call her until she contacted me. This was roughly a month after I'd asked her to leave. The private investigator found out that she'd gone to a club and was hanging out with about 10 guys in a back room. This was around 3 months into her pregnancy. I didn't hear from her at all from the moment I caught her until our court date. My family did call me, though. I should mention that her calls kept coming. About a month after the divorce was finalized and she lost my ex-father-in-law, the lawyer got in touch. He said I'd ruined his daughter's life. I let him get it off his chest, then offered to send him a copy of the data collected by the private investigator. Of course, she painted me as the unfaithful one, even claiming I was the one she'd caught in bed with one of her female friends. He agreed to this and my lawyer reviewed the data. He called me back about 2 weeks later and apologized for yelling at me. That was it, no more contact from her family. It was the private investigator who uncovered everything through his research. My attorney at the time said the court typically favors the one who presents the best evidence. Women, especially in cases involving children, are often the ones who end up having to deal with the fallout. I was lucky to have avoided a more complex situation. My lawyer advised us to provide irrefutable proof that she was the cause of our divorce to reduce or eliminate the financial obligations. We did this with the help of the private investigator and a few individuals she had angered. Along the way, we were able to do just that. I still crack lawyer jokes from time to time, but honestly, they are worth every penny and then some. As for private investigators, I'll never make fun of the really good ones. He uncovered information I had never been aware of during the divorce. I didn't seek reimbursement for her running up my credit cards. I was earning a good income at the time, around $150,000. I was making $150,000 before taxes at the time, which has since increased to $250,000. I decided to pay off those credit card charges, which cost me $200,000 before taxes. I considered it a costly mistake since I hadn't canceled them, making me legally responsible for the expenses. Pursuing her for the money would have been futile. I wouldn't have recovered anything. I just wanted to put it behind me. I've moved on from that. I let her take her stuff, including most of the items we bought together and the gifts I gave her. I wanted her out of my life and to get rid of reminders of our marriage from my house. I didn't want to pay her $2,000 a month, though. I was willing to pay her $2,000 a month for approximately 5 years, which my attorney said was the typical outcome. I also didn't want any involvement with her unborn child. I felt it would be an insult to me and reward her for her behavior. Basically, I was willing to pay for the other costs in exchange for a quick resolution and her removal from my life. I think she was playing some sort of game, and I considered this expense a way to ensure that I met the required time frame at the time of the divorce. It took 6 months and 1 day to complete the entire process in California. Now it's something like 6 weeks if there's no contest. Surprisingly, my divorce was emotionally taxing. I don't share this to seek sympathy. Instead, I hope that my story might help someone else learn from it or recognize signs that I missed looking back. Sometimes I wonder if there were subtle hints I didn't pick up on due to my blindness at the time. I still analyzed the situation, but I didn't want to engage in a drawn-out battle. In total, the attorney's fees amounted to about $112. The attorney told me I'd likely have to make monthly payments to her for about 5 years, so I saved a lot of money on that. Could have gone on longer, depending on the judge's decision. She didn't get the $2, though. Once the judge heard all the details during the final divorce hearing, I was ordered to pay $0 per month. Since the divorce was finalized, I haven't encountered her again. However, I'm aware that she's in Arizona because she attempted to apply for credit in my name there 3 times. I can't be certain if she chose to proceed with the pregnancy, but I'm highly confident that the child wasn't mine. It's likely that she was trying to deceive me into raising. I know I was manipulated, and I take responsibility for my part in it every day. She has to live with the consequences of her actions, which likely makes it more difficult for her. Even though she doesn't know me anymore, she may be aware that she had a good relationship with me at one point, but her actions led to her downfall. Meanwhile, I continued to make progress, steadily growing the business I partly owned and increasing my income. My income, too. She might still be in touch with some of our mutual friends, but I don't ask about it. Yes, she caused me emotional pain and tried to get money as a form of compensation, but she didn't succeed. I'm moving on with my life. To me, living with the consequences of her actions is a more significant punishment than death. Death would be too easy for someone like her. Many people believe I should have reacted differently when I caught them in my bed instead of walking away from my house. I understand where they're coming from, and I did consider it. But upon reflection, I realized that leaving was the best choice to avoid a physical altercation or worse. I could have easily escalated the situation. I readily admit that I was deceived. The more I look back on it, the more I suspect that she never truly loved me. I was just a means to an end for her. I played my part by providing her with the perfect opportunity. I was rarely home during the week, and when I did return, I was exhausted and eager to rest because another workday awaited me. She just needed to ensure she was home before me and asleep when I arrived. I'm someone who values transparency, so she always knew my schedule. I was indeed played, and I played right into it. Her hands. I'm just grateful that the STD test I took 2 days after catching her came back negative. There is one question that some of you may have about the child she was pregnant with. I'm ashamed to admit it, but she was planning on passing it off as mine. I didn't sign the birth certificate, and I didn't even make her take a DNA test after the divorce. The truth emerged once the baby was born, and it turned out to be Asian. I had a feeling this would happen. I thought she'd come up with some story about the baby being Asian because of her grandmother's heritage. She even said it was mine, but the truth is she was sleeping around, so I don't know who the real father is. It's a messed up situation. I'm just glad I got out of it without being on the hook for child support. I heard through the grapevine that she had ended up being given up for adoption. It's a sad situation all around. I can't imagine what the kid will go through when they inevitably find out about their parents' deception. I'm doing okay, all right? That was a fun story. Let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned. Let's dive in. My wife and I were just 6 weeks away from celebrating our 25th anniversary when I discovered that she had been involved in I had an affair with a 33-year-old bartender from New York City. I'll refer to my soon-to-be ex-wife as Maddie. She's 48, and I'm 49. We have one adult child who is 24. My son. I had always assumed that we had a wonderful marriage. I considered Maddie my best friend, someone I could trust with my life. We got along exceptionally well and never had any major arguments. Of course, we had minor disagreements along the way, but we always managed to work through them. We never went to bed angry. Our connection in the bedroom was particularly strong because we were both very adventurous and had very high libidos. We enjoyed trying new things and kept our relationship exciting by going on dates and taking romantic trips. We also enjoyed going on vacation together and making sure to have fun in the bedroom. We even engaged in intimate activities in unconventional places like a car or the outdoors whenever we had the chance. I know it may sound immature to some, but it reflected how much we cherished each other. I was genuinely happy in our marriage and believed that Maddie was too. Let me explain how I discovered the affair. Did I stumble upon a suggestive email or text exchange between her and her lover? No, I didn't catch them in the act. I actually found out through the ex-Maddie's girlfriend, Sarah, contacted me on LinkedIn and sent me a message asking if we could talk. When we spoke, I initially couldn't comprehend the information she was sharing and thought it might be some sort of prank that Maddie was playing on me. I was devastated when Sarah sent me a series of pictures and a video showing Maddie engaged in intimate acts with another. It was tough to see Maddie in such a compromising position with someone else. It really hurt, and I don't think I'll ever be able to get those images out of my mind. I don't know if I can forgive her. Maddie has done something really wrong. I think it's safe to say that this is a major betrayal of our marriage. I can't see a way to recover from it now. Let me provide some context on how this affair unfolded. Maddie's corporate office is located in New York City, and she travels there a couple of times a year for work meetings. These meetings typically take place during the Maddie usually flies out on Sunday afternoon and returns on Tuesday evening, which has been her routine throughout her time with the company. She always stays at a hotel near her office in NYC. It was at one of these hotels that she met her younger lover, a man 15 years her junior who worked as a bartender. Sarah, the former girlfriend of Maddie's lover, said they had an instant connection and hooked up one night 3 years ago. After that, they kept seeing each other for 2 more years until the affair ended last year. Sarah says her ex-girlfriend's lover only had 5 encounters with her. They all took place on Sunday evenings in her hotel room. He says they never kissed and always used protection. I find it hard to believe. Sarah says she found out about the affair 6 months later when she found explicit messages and pictures on his old phone. She confronted him and he admitted to it. The affair led to Sarah kicking him out of her life. He couldn't afford his own place in Manhattan, so he had to quit his bartending job and move back to Long Island. I asked Sarah why she took so long to reach out to me. She explained that she hadn't initially planned to tell me, but she felt she had to. Her new boyfriend, who had experienced infidelity himself and strongly despised cheaters, convinced her to do so. He insisted that she had to inform me, and that's why she finally did. I asked if she knew why the affair had ended. According to her, Maddie eventually ended it because she confessed. Her love for me was a confusing revelation. After absorbing all this information, I took some time to grieve and figure out my next steps. After careful consideration, I've decided to divorce Maddie. I still have love for her, but I can never trust her again. The image of her with that bartender will always haunt me. Furthermore, I've chosen not to confront her directly. Instead, I plan to catch her off guard by serving her with divorce papers. I don't want to give her the opportunity to explain herself or hear her excuses and apologies. I aim to make the day I'll make sure she gets those papers so she'll feel worse than I did when I found out about her affair. It's my way of getting back at her for what she did. In the meantime, I'll act like everything is normal and be really kind. My own experience shows that this kind of situation can happen to anyone, even after 27 years of marriage. I never imagined I'd be one of those people sharing their stories with the world. But here I am. My advice for married men is to never become too complacent in your marriage and to stay vigilant and alert. Once the divorce papers are ready, I'll move my stuff to storage and have them served at her workplace. When she reaches out, I'll tell her I've known for weeks and show her the pictures Sarah shared. I'll send her another picture each time she contacts me. I'll also tell our families about my decision to divorce her and why. Right now, I'm set on this choice. I'm looking forward to the day I can disrupt her life just as she has disrupted mine. I wish things would go as planned. The day came to serve Maddie, and everything seemed to be falling into place. I had all my belongings moved out in the morning, and in the afternoon, a courier delivered the divorce papers to her office. As expected, she reacted strongly and immediately called me. I answered, and I informed her that I knew all the details about her affair with the bartender, her boy toy, and that I had initiated divorce proceedings. She asked me to let her explain, but I told her I'd already moved out and to get a lawyer. Then I ended the call as I'd expected. She started calling me a lot, so I sent her the first photo with each call. I sent another one at that moment. Everything was going just as I'd planned. Later that evening, I called my son and told him the news. He was surprised and upset. He asked if there was any chance of us getting back together. But I said no, not after what she did. I told him never to stay with a cheater after our conversation. I was about to call my parents when my mom contacted me. She said Maddie had just left their house. She was looking for me while I was at my parents' house. Maddie told them everything. She said she'd been in counseling since ending the affair last year. She said she'd been diagnosed with a sex addiction. She said her infidelity was a result of this mental addiction. It made it difficult for her to resist sexual temptation. Can you believe it? After that, I went to my parents' house to have a chat with them. I was pretty frustrated because both of them tried to stop me from divorcing Maddie. They weren't saying it was okay for her to cheat, but they pointed out that it meant something that she had ended it on her own and sought help. My mom was really vocal about it, and my dad also tried to make me feel better. I told them that you should never stay in a relationship with someone who cheats, and I was surprised and disappointed by their response. I said that I thought it was wrong to think that addiction was just an excuse for her infidelity. I believe in the saying that if you commit a wrongdoing, you must face the consequences. The ultimate consequence or penalty for marital infidelity is divorce, and that's the path I intend to take. Before leaving, my parents assured me that they would support whatever decision I made but requested that I take some time to reflect on it. I informed them that I had already done so, and then left after returning to the apartment I rented. I phoned Maddie's dad to let him know I was planning to visit and talk to him. He said Maddie had just been there and had confessed everything, just as she had done with my parents. He didn't believe the addiction story, but suggested I take some time before making a final decision. We kept talking, and while I didn't make any promises, I agreed to think about it. I'm close with Maddie's parents, so going through with a divorce would also mean losing them, which would be emotionally challenging. That night, Maddie tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. On Saturday morning, my son called to tell me that his mother had contacted him the night before and confessed everything. I have to give her credit for taking full responsibility for her actions and coming clean to our entire family. My son said he disapproves of his mother's actions and will support me. He said he knows I'll face pressure from his grandparents and will stand by my decision. He also said that if his current girlfriend ever did something similar to him, he would break up with her. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm in a holding pattern, unsure of how to proceed. I'm eager to get divorced, but I'm also concerned about how our families will perceive me if I rush things. I've gone through all I just wanted to say thanks for all the advice, even if I don't see eye to eye with everyone. I'm still committed to pursuing the divorce, but I've decided to meet with my soon-to-be ex to address some issues. I'm planning to set aside 60 minutes for her. I'm going to speak my mind, and that's it. My attorney advised against it, but if I proceed, the meeting will take place at his office and it will be recorded. I proposed an alternative to meet at a neutral location with witnesses and record the discussion. My attorney agreed to this arrangement, but cautioned me to exercise caution in my words and actions, as he's seen such meetings go awry for the betrayed spouse. I've scheduled the meeting for next Tuesday at her parents' house, where my son will accompany me and record the conversation using his tripod gimbal. My son, along with my in-laws, will be in the adjacent room during the meeting. Unfortunately, my dad won't be able to attend due to a doctor's appointment at that time. My mom and my dad will be in the next room during the meeting. Unfortunately, my dad can't make it because he has a doctor's appointment at that time. I'm meeting with her to fulfill my parents' expectations. I'll give you an update after my conversation with Maddie. In the third update, we had the meeting, and it went surprisingly well, though it was emotionally challenging for me. I let her speak without interruption, with the only request being that she didn't use the sex addiction as an excuse, and she agreed not to. She began by expressing she told me she loved and longed for me. She said what she did was wrong, foolish, and meaningless. After she made her initial statements, she looked at me, and I just nodded and gave her a look that said, "Is there more?" She went on to explain that she had a moment of clarity last year after continuing the affair for 2 years. Since then, she had been going through in therapy. She admitted that she'd hidden everything from me because she was afraid of losing me. Maddie said that therapy had helped her work through the issues that led her to cheat. I asked if her therapist thought this was a temporary fix, and she said it was. I followed up by I asked her how she'd handle it if another young bartender came along. She just looked at me and tears welled up in her eyes. I told her the clock was ticking, and she needed to keep going. She started talking about how happy I was during our marriage and what she could have done to make me happier. I told her that I was happy before the affair, but that there were some fundamental things she could have done better, like being trustworthy and loyal. Maddie said that she had been loyal and only loved me. I gave her a skeptical look and laughed in her face. She tried to explain herself, but it didn't go over well. She said she only cheated when she was away, so she never neglected me. She also tried to argue that the absence of kissing and the use of rubbers somehow made a difference. It was quite absurd, and she seemed to expect me to be impressed. I urged her to listen to herself, as she sounded utterly ridiculous. She clarified that she wasn't defending her actions. I asked her why she did it if she was happy with our relationship. She said she was just attracted to the idea of a young, attractive man being physically interested in her. She felt she was no longer attractive at this point. 45 minutes had passed. I told her she only had 15 minutes left to make her case. She said that if I gave her another chance, we could get back to where we were before. I said it was impossible because I could never trust her, and the image of her with her boyfriend would haunt me every time I looked at her. She suggested we try She suggested an open relationship where I could do whatever I wanted with anyone I wanted while she would stay faithful to me. I quickly rejected this idea, emphasizing that I was not like her. This made her cry, and she spent the rest of the time begging me to take her back. I just let her cry and beg without saying anything. When the hour was up, I got up and picked up the gimbal with my son. I attached my phone and left the room. I had my son use the Dropbox app to send me the video, and then I left later that evening. Maddie sent me a text thanking me for meeting with her, but I chose not to respond. Now that I've completed that task, my plan is to contact my attorney tomorrow morning and instruct him to expedite the divorce proceedings. Our divorce was officially completed last Wednesday. We split our assets down the middle, and Maddie decided to stay in our family home, buying out my share of the equity. She says this was her best move because we might get back together and live there again one day. The divorce process was rough on me, both emotionally and mentally. As time went on, I started to think about reconciling with Maddie a lot. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't be the right move. I knew that if we reconciled, it would only make things more complicated. At the initial hearing, the judge said we had to go to counseling for 60 days. She told our attorneys that we had to finish the sessions before she would proceed with the case. I asked my attorney if she had the right to make such a demand. He said she did, and there wasn't much we could do about it. He advised me against raising strong objections or filing any challenges, cautioning that it could potentially work against my favor as the judge might hold it against me. I endured 16 counseling sessions, which I felt were painful and felt like they were a waste of time. Maddie could have made the entire process more challenging and expensive, but she chose not to, and I was grateful for that. I expressed my gratitude. I took her out to dinner the day after our divorce was finalized, and then went back to our house, well, hers, for a nightcap. We became physically intimate for the first time in over a year, and it was a positive experience. You might wonder how this makes sense for me. It meant that I couldn't remain married to her after her infidelity, nor could I contemplate living with her. However, that didn't mean I didn't still have feelings for her. We both knew that our future relationship would be based on physical intimacy. It was similar to the connection she had with the bartender. She told me she could accept this arrangement for now, but she wanted more. She promised to keep trying, and I haven't started dating other women yet, but I plan to. Maddie knows about this. I told Maddie that if one of these relationships gets serious, I'll end our physical relationship. She understood but didn't want to dwell on it. She said she'd stay monogamous with me even if I found someone else. I miss how things used to be, but I like this new arrangement. For the first time in a while, I feel positive about myself and the future.